Or at least it does for my Chromebook.
Okay. Is it recording?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Um,
Hello, welcome to my Zoom call as the host. I am in charge.
yes. Okay. Do you want to? Well, first, 3, 2, 1, go. Hi, my name is John Lyons. Pronouns are he, him, his. I am a senior. It's my third year on Earthwords. I'm a drama editor. I'm an English and creative writing major with some minors in theater and quiz. And I'm a Gemini. What about you, Shy?
Hi, my name is Shy Man. I'm a second year student here. This is my first year on Earthwords, where I am also a drama editor. She, her, hers. Um, I study chemistry and creative writing. It's a fun little combo there. And I am also a Gemini.
I didn't know that. That's very exciting.
Yes. How did you
How
not know that? I've
fortuitous.
told you this so many times.
Oh. And okay, so I'm sorry. So yes, we are doing a couple of interviews. We thought it'd be interesting. So Shy and I are working on a show together. She wrote it, I'm directing it. It's my first time ever directing a show. And so we thought it'd be interesting to talk about, for me as a director to interview Shy as a playwright, and for Shy as a playwright to interview me as a director. Anything to add?
Um, it's my first time being a part of a process of producing a show. So we're both newbies here and it's exciting.
Yeah, so I feel like hopefully it's an interesting perspective for anyone who's like wants to know more about we're transitioning from lay people from in the theater into theater makers, so to speak. So
Oh,
for anyone else maybe thinking about that transition as well. I don't know. Do you want to go first or should I?
I can start.
Okay.
John, hello,
Yes.
Mr.
Hello.
Director.
Yes.
What expectations did you have when you went into directing this show? Have those expectations been accurate, different?
Yes. So yeah, so some background on where we're at. It's the show. It's called Lighthearted, and it is a wonderful script. It's a surreal story of a woman who's trying to have her emotions surgically removed. And so one thing that I was anticipating that definitely happened is that with a plot line like that, its surrealist style, how one like how it appears as a performed piece is such a different experience than when you're reading it. Because with surrealist dialogue, when you're reading it, it is kind of hard to sometimes um, see the full picture because you need, or a lot of the times, um, uh, production choices like lighting, actor choices, all that stuff really helps to create this world. Whereas before it was just in my brain. So I was anticipating something that definitely came true um, for the actors and for you as a playwright to have these visions uh, for my ideas of what this surrealist world and everyone else's ideas of what this surrealist world would look like come together to make this completely new world that I hadn't visualized. That makes sense. So we're a little early on in the rehearsal process, like 3 rehearsals, but nevertheless, I can already see like this new world being formed. Does that make sense?
Yes, very, very eloquently spoken.
Okay. Are we going back and forth? Am I
Uh,
asking you a question?
Whatever you want.
I'll ask you a question.
Great.
Shy. What
Yes.
is I'm wondering if you have what describe to me the art of the 10-minute play. It's a very specific format, and this is a
Oh,
10-minute play
yeah.
that we've been working on. And so as a writer, as a playwright, what types of things did you think about when submitting it for production? So what types of things does a playwright think about in a 10-minute play in terms of, oh, the actors are going to need this, I'm going to need a director who can do this, like what are all those thoughts as a playwright that you have going into a play like this, or this play specifically, lighthearted?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I I think the 10-minute play festival here at Iowa has some specific challenges to it, specifically that part of the requirement when you submit a play is that the script itself cannot exceed 10 pages. And as a playwright, I like a lot of snappy one-line dialogue back and forth. But that while being, the same time as like a play, that's more condensed on a page layout. It looks much larger because it's like single word, single word, single word, single word, single word, if that makes sense. So I had to kind of rein in my personal style a little bit just to fit the page count. That was my first like little stylistic choice I had to make. And then secondly, I had to think about what I wanted to tell. And then I had to think about how to contain that within 10 minutes. How do I have a start? How do I have a arc? How do I have an end? What is the issue? Is it resolved? How do I resolve it? I had to think about if I wanted one scene, two scenes, how to combine those scenes in a manner that wouldn't be clunky. Because originally I just had two separate scenes and I hated how they transitioned. I thought it felt so clunky, and that's why I added the mimes interlude in the middle. It was sort of like a surrealist transition into the next day to allow for the 10 minutes to feel complete. Yeah, I guess when it came to inspiration, it was a little bit weird. I always would think of stories as a kid, but I never wrote them. And I always had like this idea for this dragon slaying people who had to get their emotions removed so they could like kill dragons better. And there was like this one person who didn't want their emotions removed. So I was thinking about that, and my roommate and I like to joke that we don't want emotions, we hate our emotions, we want them removed. And so I was like, let's turn that into a little play. That can be a self-contained 10-minute thing that I explore. And then I had come up with an idea earlier for a 10-minute play where there was like a character and then two other characters. One character was the main character's bones, and the other character was the main character's flesh. And I was playing around with that idea for a while, but it just felt too inside out-y to me. But I retained the idea of the flesh because I thought it was an interesting way to elaborate on the sort of like unsaid words and deep thoughts, unfiltered thoughts of a character, because your skin doesn't have a filter. Your skin does what it wants, your skin says what it wants, and you have to just deal. I hope that answered your question.
It does, yeah. Flesh is this like incredibly fascinating character in the play that is like the way I see it is like a conscious unconscious. Sometimes I think there's this like, yeah, like your body knows things sometimes before your brain does. I think that's a sentiment that a lot of folks who take the movement acting class at University of Iowa, I've heard express that, yeah, there's this kind of instinctual memory that the body has that your conscious mind might not always recognize. And flesh is like this really interesting embodiment of that, because flesh is very like almost childish, almost yeah, super fascinating character, super great playwright, Chey.
You flatter me, so
Yes, only because it deserved. Okay. Is it my turn for question?
I will ask you a question now. So
Okay.
what's different, John? You are a what's the triple threat? You're a triple threat. You're an actor, you're a writer, you're a director. What are the similarities and differences between the three? Do you identify as one over the others? Is there a particular favorite you have?
That's a great question. So I obviously this is my first time directing, so I'm very far from identifying closely with that. I think that in a hypothetical world, um, who knows, I might do it more and more frequently. This could be the only time I do it. This could be like the start of like a lifelong career, because like I'm really enjoying it. I'm 3 rehearsals in. And I don't definitely see myself, and I said this in rehearsal, that like I don't see myself as someone who like directs people, or like when I think of directing, I think of someone saying like, you do this, and that is very much like an uncomfy place for me to be in. But getting rid of those, putting those jitters aside, is really great. Uh, and then so my because it's so not director, because I've only just started being director, but writer is where my instinct is, but I've never produced a play.
Well, you don't have to produce something to be a writer.
Yes, I should say playwright. I've never had a play be produced. I've had one play be published, but it was like a freshman. Um, but so all of anything that I've written playwright wise is just confined to the Google Docs. So I also don't think actor though, because I know people at the University of Iowa who are actors who like they've read like countless volumes of Stanislavski and Meisner and Grotowski, and have done private acting workshops in New York and this and that. That's definitely not me either. Even though I do act, I don't feel like I have the credentials to say that I am an actor, but I feel the same way about being a writer, because I haven't had a play produced here. But I've had nonfiction and fiction pieces be produced, so I'm a nonfiction and fiction writer, and just not a playwright. Now I'm being facetious, because you don't have to have anything published. A playwright is someone who writes a play. That's all, even if no one else reads it. Same with all those other categories. But how are they different? So I feel like I'm flexing a different muscle with director that I've never flexed before, which is you start to see a script. At least I do, and maybe this is like, I'm sure if there's any directors listening, let me know if this is like the really wrong instinct to have. But I start to think of it more in terms of like, how do we arrange this picture so that the audience sees it as clearly as possible? Like, you've created this amazing picture, this fabulous picture, that when you're reading it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a fabulous picture. And so the director and the actors are like translators of that picture, are trying to like repaint it on a stage in a completely different forum. Um, uh, what's the term for when you're writing a poem about a painting, and a anacrusis? I don't know. It's very much like that. So and then when you're an actor, I feel like you also look at the script in a very similar way. But of course, I have, when I act, which again I'm really not. I'm hesitant to call myself an actor, but you definitely look at certain parts of the picture and you're like, how can I live these parts of the picture as truly as possible when I hop onto the stage? I think as the director, I'm like, how do I create this picture? But as an actor, I think, how do I live it? If that makes sense. And then by living it, by actually just doing the picture, whatever that might be, that part of the picture is your role. You do it, you live it, and then that necessarily paints the picture. So I mean, that's just my interpretation of the three, but I'm very not an expert on either of those in any of those categories. But anyway, is it good? Is it answer your question?
Yes, a
Okay.
very humble answer too.
Oh, well, it is true. I know so many people who like yourself, that are like playwrights, who are like, they're in it, they've done it. Especially some of the actor friends I know, And it's hard for me to put myself in that category. But writer, I do. I'm about that. I do that. Okay. So a question for you. So when you're writing, one thing that I'm curious about is people who don't consume a lot of theater, usually surrealist plays, are probably some of the last plays they get to experience, and they're so great. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about surrealism, a little bit why it appeals. So, like your definition of surrealism, why it appeals to you, and what you think a surrealist theater production does that only a surrealist theater production can do. So people may have read surrealist poetry, surrealist fiction or nonfiction, seen surrealist art. What do you think a surrealist show can do that a realist show cannot do, or cannot do, but does differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. So I didn't even no, I refer to it as abstract, like abstract art, but that's just my surrealism, abstract. They're very similar.
I'm
If
sure
you're an
there's like
art major,
technical.
don't yell at me.
Yeah, I'm sure there's technical definitions in some art history dictionary, but for now,
um,
for the terms of this interview.
yeah, so I didn't know abstract theater was a thing until I came into my, freshman year here last year. Second semester, I had playwriting one with Dakota Parabeck, and the first play that they had us read was God's Ear by Jenny Schwartz, and it's a very, very abstract play. And I remember reading it, and my mind was blown. I was like, "What? You can do that? That's theater?" Question mark. And then I got really into this one act musical called In Trousers by William Finn, which is like this one act musical from the 80s, and it's the prequel to like the popular musical Falsettos. Um, and it just blew my mind because I was like, you can take like these crazy, clever concepts that don't fit together or are too big for the stage, and you can cram them in there and you can make them fit and you can make them beautiful and you can make them into this touching story. The way I define surrealism and surrealist theater is very much so like an abstract painting. I think of it more as art than writing, I guess. I think of it like, how can I tell this story in a way that hasn't been done before? How can I tell a story with the little nuances that live in my brain or the notes in my phone or the little musings I have day to day that I notice that I want to point out that I think tell beautiful things but aren't necessarily noticed as much. How can I turn an allergy to birds into a love story? How can I, in the case of Lighthearted, create a story about accepting parts of yourself through a medical procedure while there is a piece of skin that walks around? Yeah, I guess that I don't think that's a very grounded definition, but I also don't think there is a grounded definition for surrealism just inherently, because surrealism is such like a floaty thing. I believe the second question, what was the second question part of that again?
Just about it was kind of, yeah, like what is your definition, why does it appeal to you, and I feel like you've answered those. And then so the third is like, an audience walks into a surrealist show,
Yes.
what can that surrealist show do with that audience, for that audience, that is really unique to surrealist theater?
Yeah.
From your, as a playwright, what are the things that you think, oh, the audience will, XYZ will happen because of this surrealist element?
Yeah, thank you. What I think about surrealism and abstract theater is that it's like a puzzle. It seems very alienating at first. You first open a script or you're first walking into the theater and people are talking in ways they're not supposed to talk. People are doing things they're not supposed to do when you've been raised on realism theater. And so it's very alienating. It feels very like pushing you back. But then if you like keep going and you don't give up and you keep going through it, you start to catch on to these nuances. You start to connect meanings in your mind. You start to see the full picture. And so it allows you as the viewer to have sort of that epiphany yourself. It's not exactly like spoon-fed to you, not that realism theater is at all, but it allows sort of an intimacy between creator, between actor, between audience member, and it because you're all sort of like in this little club. You're all sort of watching this play that from an outside perspective might make no sense, might be so scary, might put so many people off, but when you realize that it is a piece of art, that it is to be interpreted in one way or the other way, those who interpret it feel this sense of unity, feel the sense of belonging, feel the sense of like, there it is, there's the puzzle, there's the bird bones, and there's the mouse skeleton, and there's the mime, and there's the piece of skin.
There's something that's so interesting. Like, yeah, I've never thought about it like that. Like surrealism as community building experience. I think I mean, at least I think all theater is kind of a community building experience. Everyone gets entered into this world they've never been in. But surrealism, you're right, has like this added benefit of, or this unique element of that community building where everyone walks in, and at first it's a little, you get thrown off. Everyone is talking in full sentences all day. Everything makes sense. Everything's grounded in reality. You all walk into this room and get entered into this new world where you're flipped upside down, and there's walking flesh that talks in like half sentences that are like, but then you start to learn the rules of this world and you're all kind of in it together. That's really interesting. Yeah, surrealism is community building. That's so insightful.
Thanks.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me
And then I guess keep an eye on the time. So this might be the last question.
Oh, I have to make it count then.
Right? I mean, it's been probably like this 15 minutes. We can always do more of these if folks want.
Yeah.
Email me at john-lyons@uiowa.edu if you want more.
Send fan mail to my PO box.
Yeah.
Can I ask you 2 questions? Can I break the rules?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I have 2 separate things that I really want to ask. Less so about directing, I hope you don't mind, more so about your experiences as a theater person in the pandemic, as well as your position on Earthwards. So firstly, when you read drama submissions, what are things that clue you in on, that you want to push it forward? What are things that stand out to you? And then how is directing / acting / playwriting going different due to the pandemic? Do you think this is a permanent change to the drama industry? Do you think it will go back to exactly how it was before? Or do you think it will sort of shift? They'll merge?
Oh, that's a good question, and I'm sure much smarter people who know more about theater than me will have been thinking about that as well. But to start with the Earthwords question, yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of times with Earthwords, in fact, I've been there for 3 years. Every single year, there's like the majority of plays I like want to. We have so many good submissions, and so it's really hard when it's like everything, like all the technicalities are there, and like technicalities like thinking maybe this is a pretentious way to look at it, but like thinking of a script as like a blueprint for an experience, right? So you what experience does it leave you with? And so did that experience make certain images stick to your head that you can't forget, right? Did it have certain sentiments that you can't forget? Did it have an image or a sentiment that I've never seen before, and therefore other people may not have seen before? So a lot of times you'll have a script that is like absolutely hilarious, like knocking it out of the park. All the technicalities are there. Like they've set up the blueprint for the experience so that in the reading experience, you're laughing at the jokes and everything's going super well. And when it comes time to publish, you do have to think of things like, um, is this saying, is this the type of really, really good that I've seen before? And if so, looking for the type of really, really good where the experience that it left, and the thing is, that's the thing that kind of sucks too, is all this is so subjective, right? So like when I'm reading a play and the experience that evokes in John is going to be so different from the next person. But if I read a play and the experience is like hilarity and it's so funny, I think they do like just an example of comedic piece really well. Then there's this second question of like, is it doing something important in terms of the message? So all messages are important, but I think some important messages get said more often than others, and so that is something I think a lot about. Is this something that people need to hear, especially because not a lot of people are saying it? And who am I to judge that? But so I can only use my experience of like, what have I heard a lot, right? And what haven't I heard a lot? Um, and then that kind of naturally leads into what perspective is on the page. Um, when it comes to perspective of ways of seeing things that I haven't encountered before, different backgrounds that might not have be like published historically at Earthwords before, or just magazines generally. So that sort of stuff I think is really important to me. And at the end of the day, so like there's always like, oh man, we have two great pieces that are so similar. So which one feels like it's doing something? Sometimes they use another pretentious term, fresh. Which one? Which one? I say familiar because I don't think I push. Another pretentious thing. I push back on this notion of cliches. I don't know if there are cliches. Isn't everything a cliche? I don't know. Who knows? But familiar. I think to myself like, oh, is this like a familiar type of thing? And then in terms of technicalities, in order to nail the technical aspects of a story or a play, I mean, gosh, whoever can figure that out is like the right $1 million question. You can say, oh, three-dimensional characters, and oh, the pacing's good, and this and that. But I think at the end of the day, things that we try and posit as objective analysis is just subjective experience with the play. And so I try and approach it saying like, you're just John, you're one person, and using my emotional reaction, what I've seen before and what I haven't seen before, as the guiding light, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all doing. There's no guidebook of what makes it good or bad. It's not a math equation. So we kind of are just, in a lot of ways, I see a lot of opinion in the publishing world. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's something to navigate mindfully. And it's not a bad thing because it's the only thing there is to do. How else do you consume art if not by analyzing your subjective opinion? And then
checklist, how many big words does it use? It's got to hit
check. Yeah, that's how you know it's good, is like count the number of large words. Is it written in meter? Meter's great. It's cool. That's 100% a joke. People who can read in meter are superheroes, or write in meter are superheroes. So yes, that's a very long-winded answer to say. The first thing I do is just see how I feel, and then keeping in mind that this is just John's subjective opinion. No matter how many literary devices you can read and identify to try and make it seem like an objective fact, it's not. It's just John's subjective opinion, and being mindful of that. How is it going to change after the pandemic? Geez Louise. Zoom theater isn't bad. It's good.
A
Zoom theater's
controversial
good.
opinion.
I mean, nothing, in my opinion, beats being in person.
Mhm.
But I was amazed when I started doing Zoom theater that some of it, I shouldn't say, it is so far from a replacement from actual like bodies breathing together in the space together. But I do think in extreme situations, I've been able to feel a sense of community. Nothing like it will never replace, nothing ever could replace the actual theater. But at least from my perspective. But uh, I was surprised to find that, and maybe it's just like a coping mechanism for quarantine, but some of the moments in rehearsal where you say something so funny that you can't stop yourself from laughing, or the joke that the playwright wrote is so funny, or you feel this sense of community, or you feel that shiver when a moment hits right. A lot of that stuff still is happening. Um, and so I think in extreme circumstances like quarantine, I think that Zoom is not, will never replace the theater. But I think it, people, myself included, are realizing that it is a tool within theater makers' toolboxes of things to use. That a Zoom play, a play done over Zoom, is now an experience we've all tried, or so many of us have tried. And we know, again, like thinking of theater as like blueprint for experience, right? For creating experiences within audiences. Zoom isn't completely incapable of doing that. It's not as good as in person, but you can imagine extreme scenarios where people use it. And you can imagine that a lot of theater makers who I think generally value community are really feeling lost of that. And so I think that one healing moment for me, and for I think a lot of theater makers, will be when they can see a show again in person. And I hope I don't forget how special that space is. I don't think I will, because being without it for the longest I've been without it since I was a kid. Sucks. So, the magic of theater cannot be replaced by Zoom. I'm sending like mixed messages. Like Zoom's good, but you can't replace it. But it is. It's like movies are good too. It's just another storytelling tool in our toolbox, but it's not being in person. I kind of sent a lot of mixed messages in that answer.
No, I think it was a good
Ask
answer.
me after I'm vaccinated. After we're all vaccinated, I'll see what my opinion about Zoom theater is. I might never turn on the software ever again.
I think it's good for accessibility.
Yes.
And I think it allows people to just create without feeling pressure. Like you can just be like, oh, I'm gonna go self-produce a Zoom play,
Yeah.
get 6 friends, here's a script, let's do it.
Yeah, you don't need a, especially if you're in a community that doesn't have like just doesn't have a theater within access, or like the vast majority of us don't have a theater they can access. I think that's a really great point. That it makes the theater making world so much more accessible. And so thank goodness that it is good. Zoom works better than I thought it would when I first did my first Zoom play back in March. Yikes.
Okay. Do you want to ask
Okay.
me one last question? Because I do believe our coworkers are waiting.
Oh, I feel like that's a good place to end it. I feel
Okay.
like
Yes, I agree.
I think you asked more questions than me, but that's okay. again, email if we can do another one. If you want to hear more. Yeah, so this is just an installment on something that might be more just conversations about theater from a director asking his playwright questions and the playwright asking her director questions. If you have ideas of stuff you'd like us to do, just as a staff, you can email John-Lyons. That's Lyons at uiui.edu.
Don't forget
We're
to
Earthworks.
click like, share, and subscribe. Ding the bell for notifications.
Yeah, I don't know if we have a like button, but I'll ask our web editors.
That's just a YouTube like.
I know, but now I kind of want one. Okay. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, go read Earthwords.
Oh gosh, how do I just
Just press the button.
Oh, there it is.